Thanks for joining us today for our webinar. Today I'm going to run through the Unifier tool from Oracle. And I'm joining you today from Calgary, Nicole Jardin, founder and CEO of Emerald. Now let me touch on Unifier, and I'm going to run through some ideas on how you can use it. Okay, so some of the key challenges, of course, that we have are delivering projects within the budget. Okay, very big problem still. This data may be a little out of date, but I doubt it's changed a heck of a lot. And we really want to get these mega projects and even smaller projects in on time and on budget. Now we know over the last few years, there's been even more delivery challenges, more supply chain challenges, et cetera, et cetera. So having a system that helps you track well, prioritize well, and see not only one project, but all your projects will be really important for this. Okay, so I'm going to show you those sorts of layers that we've got available in Unifier. So Oracle did this review a little while ago. Again, this might be a few years old, but some of the main reasons we struggle with projects are inefficiency and execution, which of course is something that Unifier has huge potential to help you with. Understanding your budget constraints. Again, we've got very strong cost control in Unifier, so that'll be something I'm going to touch on. I'm going to show you that. Regulations, okay, understanding the rules, regulations of your execution, whether that's specifications that were required and or delivery mechanisms and safety, etc. And then of course, change management. So I will show you some change management within the tool as well. And the documents that support change management, they're very, very key. So I'll touch on that. So of course, if we can improve our execution, we're going to be going a long way. Okay. Now, why do we struggle with those things? Well, let me ask a quick question just to see where the folks on the webinar feel like their struggles are. So what are some of the things you're struggling with? So as project controls people, you can go ahead and answer that if you wish, and I'll share it for anyone who did choose to vote. So what are some of the things that you find are challenging? So in delivering a project, depending on your role, of course, if you're a government or an owner, managing funding might be a big one. If you're more on a contractor side, cost control, so your spending will probably be a big one. Now, spending may become a challenge because you're not sure the scope, you're not sure the documents, maybe you're having trouble making sure you've got the right documents. So all of these things have some impact. And then depending again on the kind of project that you're in, site controls will be really important. Understanding what you're working towards, what you're trying to install, making sure any questions or issues are dealt with quickly, those will become really important. And hopefully those don't turn into changes and don't turn into claims and disputes, okay? So it's gonna vary, of course, it's gonna vary depending on your project. But I just thought it would be interesting to throw that up for people to see some different things others may be struggling with too. So I just touched on clarity of scope, okay? So again, we might have some projects that are being delivered as time and materials, cost plus, design build, very, very many different models that you might be working with that could make the scope of what's going to be built a challenge to make sure you're on top of it, make sure that we're getting everything clear. Now, of course, we want to deliver consistently, right? We want to make sure we're managing our warehouse properly. We don't want the wrong materials to be grabbed and installed in the wrong place. That just makes a ripple effect. And so that's another key area, is making sure we're delivering on time and also managing the deliveries and the installation process. Now that starts to potentially kick into change control. Now, I didn't mention, but the first 5 years after my engineering school, I worked in claims. And that's really why I started Emerald, was because although I enjoyed working in claims, it was very challenging work. It was frustrating because the project hadn't gone well already. And I wanted to try and do something to make the projects go better, help the clients do a better job in delivering. Okay. And change control was hugely important. I saw some very strange change orders be requested months and months and months later. And that became disputes, of course. So we want to make sure we're ahead of changes, ahead of things that are diverting the project or not letting you deliver on time, and make sure we've got the documentation at the time to either settle the disputes or at least have a proper conversation as things are going on, and arm wrestle it as it goes on, not this big turmoil at the end. Okay, so these are the things that Unifier will bring to the table for you, and it helps you also build better processes, business processes, and improve on them. Okay, so that's the big thing within Unifier. You're going to see it's a very dynamic tool, very flexible tool, highly configurable. Okay, so those are things we've got. I'm going to show you just to give you a flavor for them. And that can be a huge benefit, but you've got to do it right. Okay, if you're interested in a tool like that, that will be able to work on any project you take on. You got to deploy it well and make sure the processes can be adapted for your different projects. You know, the way you deliver a project maybe in Calgary versus in Texas versus in Philippines can be quite different. There's no doubt about it. So you want a tool that's very flexible and can grow with you as your business changes. Okay, so let me touch on some of the benefits that you're going to be able to see if you looked at a tool like this. Okay, so with Unifier, huge potential benefits. This was some studies again that Oracle did on delivery, margin erosion. So of course that's for a contractor. Okay, so when you've got a overhead profit margin, you don't want it to disappear through changes or inefficient management. Okay, so that's an important piece, of course. And making sure you're avoiding claims and disputes is a big one. Now, I'm going to show you how the tool works. So I'm going to go into it and show it to you in action. Now, it's a demo database, and I'll show you some general ideas. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to explain some of the configuration, the configurability. Okay, so to me, this is the big benefit of Unifier, is that we can model your business very, very closely. So you have a company, you have multiple divisions likely, or multiple locations if you're an owner, and those would relate to what is called a shell in Unifier, okay? And then within the shell or the division, the location, you can have multiple projects. Now these projects can be templated, so you can have different gates, different phases within the projects, and that can turn on and off documents, different modules, if you will, in the software, or what's called a business process. It could also dictate different workflows, different criteria. So the software is highly configurable, which means it can be very nicely modeled according to your business processes. Now, not only can you model the sort of different components of your company and your projects, but you can configure the different data components. So what I'm trying to show you there is we have different modules, different places that you can put in data. So it's called a business process, or a BP. You might hear me use the word BP during the demo. That's what that's referring to. And then you can you can configure the data components as well, the different elements, the different fields, okay? So they can be pick lists, they can be pick lists that join other pick lists, so pick lists that work with one another, dates, of course, lists, text, calculations, et cetera, et cetera. So the tool does allow you to insert your own requirements, okay? So you don't have to work with just what's there and then not be able to modify it. That's not the case, okay? So in terms of, some of you may have used contract management or expedition. So I'd say this is a heads and tails above in terms of configuration and scalability. Okay, so we didn't have all that scalability in contract management, but contract management could be deployed a little easier. Okay, so this does require a little consulting, there's no doubt about it, to get it set up properly. Now, in terms of configuration, we can configure the screens. So if you've ever been in software and you say, well, I want this field in there, but I don't want my contractor maybe to see it. I want to be careful that a competitor to one of my subcontractors doesn't see this. So maybe I can't share this software with them, okay? So that is stuff that goes away with Unifier, because we can configure the screens to show fields or not, depending on who you are, to let you edit fields or not. And also, we can have a module that shares certain data off of a module that might have multiple data components, okay? So that we can ensure that we're securing data. Makes it much more flexible on how you can deploy it, okay? So I will show you a module like that, just to give you the idea of what is possible. And then the workflows. So this is something that most software tools, I would say, out there on the market that are competitors don't come anywhere close. Even Aconex, which is also an Oracle tool now, does not have the configuration for workflows, not anywhere close to this. It has some, but it's not nearly as dynamic as what you could do in Unifier, okay? So depending, again, on your needs, I'm not saying every module needs so many different steps, but sometimes you do need a more complicated workflow. If, let's say, you have a vendor approval process with site safety, with contracting and financial requirements, you don't necessarily want everyone to see all those pieces, okay? So this is highly configurable, which is something that's really wonderful when you're trying to set up good standard business processes. Oh, that slide looks like it didn't come through as well as I wanted. Okay, not a problem. I'll run through that with you in the software. So in terms of the overall modules in Unifier, we have the ability to do, as I mentioned, project level data, business unit level data, and corporate level data. And I'll show you that. And we have contract documents. We've got, document management. So things like drawings, transmittals, submittals, all the paperwork that you need to get approved before you execute. And then, of course, we've got the site documentation, we've got closeout documentation, we even have the capability to have facility management components as well. And all of those can roll up to portfolio level dashboards inside the tool. And if you prefer to have some of the dashboarding taken out and put outside the tool, that's also something that you can do with the software. Okay, so I've given you a bit of an overview. Let me go ahead and jump into Unifier and show you it in action. And hopefully I wasn't, okay, it could have timed out, just depending on how long I was not clicking around, but it didn't, so that's great. Okay, So let me give you the lay of the land of what you're looking at. Okay, so we have sort of this different navigation here on the top. So the first area I'm going to click into is the company level. So as I mentioned, there are things that do happen at the company level and that you might manage at the company level. And those items you want to be able to be fed and available in your projects, okay? So let me start there, and then I'll jump into the different layers that we have available, okay? So this is the company level. This is the sort of the, could be the divisional level, geographical level, that sort of thing. So here I'm showing you there's capabilities of different dashboards, and these dashboards can be drill-ins. So this is the number of projects like region, and no more drill-ins on this case. There might be some here, yeah. So there can be multiple layers of drill-ins if you want such graphics in Unifier. Now, then I'll jump in and show you various things at the project level. So I'll touch on those different layers for you. So let's go back to the company as the starting point. So some of the things that we usually might want some management at the corporate level might be things like vendors. Okay, so I'm going to look at the vendor master. Of course, we're going to want to understand something about costs rolling up, and it could be at the divisional level or the corporate level. I'm going to show you the corporate level today. And then there may be things that you purchase that could be purchased globally, if you will. So again, at the corporate level. So they've been tagged in this example as bid items. So things that we might want to purchase. Now, the reason we might want to set it up that way, of course, is we might have some purchasing that's done at the corporate level and then transferred in to projects, okay? So again, depending on your requirements, you may do bulk purchases, maybe of structural steel, and long lead items you may purchase in bulk in advance of the project, okay? So I'm going to show you that as well. So we've got the ability to create business process modules at the corporate level, at the shell level, or the divisional level, and also, of course, at the project level. So this makes the tool super flexible, and you can make those different modules speak to one another. So let me start with vendors, because that's usually pretty straightforward. Almost everyone will have a vendor list that needs to be managed. So I'll go ahead and click into vendors just to start off slowly here. So this is more or less the way the tool works. So we have our navigation on the left, then we have a log screen, depending on the module I'm in. So in this case, it's our vendor pre-qualification area. And then I can click in to a document. This is sort of a quick preview before I launch it. And then I can go right in and it opens up another window. Okay, so that's pretty much the way most things work inside of Unifier when we're working in the web app. Now we can deploy these modules to a tablet, to a telephone, okay? Now they don't have to be deployed with all these fields if we send it to the mobile apps, okay, just to use the real estate better. So we've got all those different technologies available to be used across the Unifier platform. We also have some vendor portals as well that are available. So I'll touch on that as well. So vendor information, of course, is pretty standard probably across most companies. We're looking at some info about the vendor, their probably preferred mailing information. We might have some discipline tracking. So we have different metrics that we can bundle. So we've got pick list, tagging, coding available. And we can put in financial information, insurance, financial ratings, construction reviews, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what we want in here is highly configurable. In fact, this module is a module that we built, okay? This is built from scratch. So most of the ones you'll see with this Emerald Associates ink in front of it, you're gonna know that was built from scratch. Now, what data you want to gather for your vendors and your pre-qualifications can vary, okay? So this is just food for thought. And everything I'm showing you, more or less, is food for thought. So keep that in mind. If you don't want these fields here, that's fine. You don't have to have them because it's all configurable. And then you can have a variety of different things here, okay? Now, the thing that's interesting is we can build all sorts of different ratings. This can be manual, but we can have calculations as well that do different ratings inside the system, okay? So very, very configurable system. And you'll also see that in this example, I've got multiple tabs. So these multiple tabs are partly how you can control the screen and who has access, okay? Not much info there, so it's not very interesting. And these tabs can have data that can be used on other modules, okay? So if you know certain documents, for example, go to the accountant, those can be pre-built, pre-filled off of these different fields, okay? So highly, highly flexible in terms of how you can use the system, okay? Okay, so that's vendors. That's a vendor pre-qualification module. Now we built this, of course, on top of the basic vendor module, okay? So this is one that's kind of enhanced additional type of business process that we built, okay? Now, this is an important module if you're an owner. Of course, you're gonna want to make sure that you're bidding in a fair manner and that you're having the backup material to evidence why you're choosing various contractors. And you, of course, wanna make sure that the contractors have the appropriate background to take on your projects, okay? Okay, so that's a simple one, and the vendors go hand in hand with it. So if we clicked into a vendor, just a little bit more, and these modules can piggyback on each other. So pick lists, etc., can come from the different components. Okay, so you're going to see some overlaps in some of the columns that are, sorry, the tabs that are available, the sub tabs. And then we can identify which skill set each vendor is able to perform. So this can be handy if we're going to use the bidding module that is inside of Unifier. Okay, so we can actually have bids that require certain CSI numbers, as you saw there, as background to be able to bid. So this can help you also with your bidding portal components. So those are typically done at the corporate level, perhaps geographically at a level that's business level. You may not overlap your vendors from different countries. So again, that sort of separation can be done inside the system. Now, another key thing that you're going to want typically at the corporate level is a list of all the projects rolled out to a company cost sheet, okay? So this is looking at all the projects in the system with a variety of statuses, okay? So you can have some status control in there. And it's giving you a roll-up of what's going on with those projects. So I'm going to scroll down a little here. So if I want to do a deeper dive into a given project, I can click on the project and I can see the details. Now I'm going to do that in more detail in a minute, but I can also look across this project and see some details this way as well. So let me just scroll down a bit. Did I lose it? Sorry, I may have clicked too far. Yeah, let's go this way. And then you can see what's going on with that particular project. So let me scroll this over and just give you a bit of a feel for it. So this sheet is can be quite a large spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet can contain data that you wish. So this can grab data from any business process that we put in the system that has costs on it. So those could be contracts that we are giving out. They could include our budgets if we're a contractor and we've been given money to run the project. So that's typically a budget. We can see those here. As we start to execute on the project, we might start to track our labor, equipment, and materials charges to date in daily diaries, or what I'm calling here on a LEM, which is labor, equipment, materials subcontractor. Okay, so that could be also equated to an accrual. If you've done that kind of work before, you know you want to accrue what your earned components have been. So we can have all of that put inside to this cost sheet, and then we can drill in. Every one of these little blue numbers is a drill in, so we could get into the details. Okay, so this is a fantastic part of Unifier. Again, not too many competitors, I don't think, can come close to the capability that we've got live inside the system here. Now, I'll go into that in more detail with a different project. So just wanted to give you a flavor for how that can work. And then there's different filtering capabilities, et cetera, that you have inside of here. So this is a fantastic tool, gives you cost roll up of all the projects into this cost sheet. Now, not every project will have the exact same cost structure. Not every project will have the exact same way of naming documents and naming different components. And the thing that's fantastic about Unifier is it can accommodate all that flexibility. So when we create a document, we marry it up to a standard inside of Unifier. That way you've got the flexibility, but you also have that ability to bring data together into these sort of cost worksheets. Now, as we start to execute projects, we sometimes will want to have a way of gathering different key components, different key pieces of equipment into a place that we could cross-check how that particular piece of equipment is performing, either in terms of how we're executing against it or how we're what our current rate is with particular vendor. Okay, so that's really what this bid item area is meant for. It allows us a common material list, if you will, across the organization, and it helps us also with various procurement that we're going to get into. Okay, so this is set up at the corporate level in this example. Again, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be done at the divisional level or certainly at the project level. And you can mix and match. That's the key thing there. Now, the intent for that is because we might have some blanket purchase orders that we might need to execute on. Okay, again, it depends on your role. But if you're an owner and you have 5, 6 projects that you want to go buy structural steel on, you may choose to do a blanket purchase order. If you've got if you're a contractor and you have multiple projects that you know need structural steel, you could also use this sort of concept, is to do a blanket purchase order. So what that means is this is a charge that's outside of a particular project. Okay, so we go out to bid and we need to buy structural steel. In this case, that 200,000 pounds. We've got a unit rate, and that could have come in through a bid process, or it could be sole source, depending on your criteria. And that is being purchased in bulk. Now, we might need to, at some point, release that to different projects. So this is how this would work. So plant B, plant C, plant D, and these will actually go into the project as a cost, okay? But it's, so it's a push and pull, if you will, from the corporate level as well as the project level to make sure all the cost control is done properly. Okay, so these are actually executed in the project, and then I'm seeing the summary here is a better way to put it. And then there may be additional ways that we purchase against this. So although I did a blanket purchase order, I might re-up various procurement against it. Okay, so that's another key concept at the corporate level. Now, you may also have master contracts that are let at the corporate level. Okay, so you might have engineering companies that you work with on multiple projects, and they've got a blanket agreement that you can execute against. That could also be true for some of your different equipment, perhaps your crane rentals, or perhaps in my example, it might be a drill rig in one of these examples, okay? Or we can use the environmental services. So the point here is really that we have the ability to execute, again, at the corporate level, at the divisional level, or at the project level. And then we'll have a way to draw down against these master service agreements. Okay, I'll just show you one real quick, and then we'll start to dive into the project level. So the idea here is the master service agreement can have multiple contracts against it. That way we can see how much procurement or how much execution we're actually achieving against a given service agreement as well. Okay, so we've got that multiple layer of reporting. And these two contracts are within different projects that we've got in the system. Now, we can navigate to that contract that's out in another project, and then you'll see the details in there as well. Okay, so it could be a contract, it could be a purchase order. Again, just depends on how your company does the different procurement. So we've got, in this case, we've got this contract for Crawford Engineering. This is the master service agreement that we were using against or referring against, or perhaps picking unit rates that were agreed, that sort of thing. And then we've got some procurement that we've done. Okay, now it can be multiple lines, as in this example. They can be lump sum, they can be unit rate line items. Oops, sorry. Come on, mouse. There we go. So they can be different work packages within the particular project, and of course they can be unit rates, or they can be lump sum or unit rate. And we've got the cost code distribution, so they can have multiple different cost codes. Okay, so the key here is these are what we're going to execute against. It's usually what you're going to invoice against. You could have line items that are more detailed to roll up to this invoicing as well. Okay, so you can, again, have multiple layers on it. And then something that you're able to do in Unifier is you can create these summary tabs that are grabbing data at various modules and then putting them up here as summaries. So this works very, very well. So if you're the person who's the contract administrator, you may not know if any RFIs are out there. And we likely don't have any on an engineering contract, which we don't. And we may not have submittals, against an engineering contract, but you're not close to that paperwork. It's usually someone else who's executing that paperwork, but you may want to understand how are those components going. Okay, so this gives you a great flexibility to roll up summaries from other modules. Okay, so that's fantastic. It's something that saves a lot of time for your team when they're doing different work inside the system. Okay. So those are some pretty typical things that we've seen with our clients that they might need at the corporate level. Now you might have corporate documents, standards, etc., that would be here at the corporate level that you make available inside of the project. So you can do that, certain safety standards, perhaps, certain inspection standards, perhaps. So there could be a huge variety of documents that you might want to manage at the corporate level. We have two different concepts inside of here, and I'll start touching on some of the paperwork capability. So we have documents that have been approved, if you will, and we have documents that have been submitted but not published, so they're not usable yet. And there's a few different ways to manage that, and I'll do that inside the project. It'll give you a better idea. Okay, so I'll jump into a project and start showing you some of the components in a project. So this is typically where you would work most of the time, again, depending on your role, inside of the Unifier environment. So depending on your role, you may have certain modules that you have access to. So I'm showing you the way we laid this out. It does not have to be laid out this way. It's more or less chronological, not exactly, but more or less. And again, depending on your particular role, you may just have access to one area inside of here. Okay, so if I am dealing with transmittals, that's my main role, is to handle transmittals that come in, then I might have just this module. Okay, or perhaps shop drawings or submittals. That might be a better example. Okay, so if that's my role, maybe that's the main module that I have access to. Okay, so don't feel overwhelmed when you see this list and you see there's a lot of stuff in there. It's, of course, I'm an admin, so I'm showing you everything that's in there, but your user would be given, based on their role, just certain access to certain modules. Okay, so let me show you another type of document. So this is one of the types of documents, and I'll just expand that so you can see it better. Inside a Unifier, this is a submittal registry. A transmittal would look pretty darn similar. And we've got just some simple data about what the register is. So in this case, it's doors. I'm receiving various documents related to doors, and it might be one or many. So in this example, I've got many attachments that I've received, okay? And you can receive them in a variety of different ways. You may have a portal where they're published up to that you merge Unifier into the portal, and the portal will hold unpublished attachments. Your team can review them and push them up to publish. So that's what I was trying to explain here. So there's this layer of control, if you will, on what is allowed to go into the system. Okay. Now, so I'm showing you there's two different examples, and each one of these can have the ability to have an attachment with reviews and comments. Okay. So this is a view of the attachment, and then there can be multiple comments. There can be multiple attachments on here, and you can have multiple people who have contributed to commenting against a particular document. Okay. Now, We can have multiple reviews on a document, and we can have we can launch AutoView and do markups on the document. So that's a quite flexible, functional tool in terms of doing different comments on attachments. Okay, so I'll just make another little example here. Oops. Okay. Now I can also put attachments into the comments. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And oops, sorry, clicked on the wrong button. I'll click on this one. And then you can see the different revisions, and you can also have the audit functionality inside the system. So it's fully auditable. It'll keep track of all the different edits, uploads, etc., that have been done in the system, and what fields have been modified, etc., inside the system. Okay, so that's super important. If you've ever been in a claim or a dispute, you know these sort of logs are invaluable in terms of backing up the legitimate validity, if you will, of the paperwork, of the correspondence, of the drawings, etc. Okay. Now, this is another one where we can have submittals that are uniquely sent in, and they can be bundled together. So there are the ability to piggyback or have modules work together is a big thing in Unifier. And that's that capability is across the system. Now, let me just go back to that for a second, because I didn't show the way that you could upload various documents. So in terms of actually getting attachments in here, so we can browse the document manager, which is what I was explaining earlier, where we have documents that are sitting inside there, and they've been pre-vetted, if you will. And those can be browsed, and we can pull files in. Okay, so again, we've got different folder structures. So I can add to my modules this way. Or if I'm a little more decentralized in terms of how I do the various documents, I can browse. And I can browse to my computer. I can also drag and drop from the computer. Okay, so I can do a few different ways here. And I just put a few little samples inside of here just so you can get the idea. So I can just grab, I can drag and drop. And then I can do some fill-ins here. So I can put some info inside of here, and I can upload this way. Okay, so this is one way I can do it. We can use Excel to upload attachments that are linked. So there's a variety of different ways to do the different uploads. Oh, it looks like I picked something a little bit bigger than I probably should have, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so there's many different ways to get the different documents that you might be looking at, photos, etc., that you might need to upload into the system. Okay, I probably should have paid more attention. I grabbed something a little big, so it's just about finished. And then we'll go to the next. Okay, so very easy, very nice to work with. Lots of different ways that you can perform your work in an efficient manner. Okay, and then those will come into the system. You see them there, and then I can do different comments and reviews. As I mentioned, we can review the documents with AutoView, or which is more formal system with the ability to do different markups and comments inside of the markups. Or I can use just that simple review with simple commenting. Okay, so it depends on the kind of work that you're doing inside of your system. Yeah, and then there's just a few more features here when you're working AutoView with different consolidations, etc. Okay, so I'll just open that up just to give you the flavor of it. And AutoView is actually an Oracle tool. It was built into Unifier prior to Unifier being part of Oracle. So there are different things that you can do in AutoView with different markups, etc. inside of here, okay? So you could use that. If you have another tool you prefer to do them in and bring them in, you could do that as well, okay? So different options in terms of the way that you handle things like drawings, submittals, sketches, etc. Okay, now let me backtrack just a moment and show you the cost worksheet for one given project. And then I'm going to jump into some site documents, okay? This is always the struggle in showing Unifier. There's so many bits, but I just want to give you a bit of a flavor for it, really. I'm going to jump back to the cost sheet, and I'm just going to give a bit more room, just to give you a feel for some of the different cost tracking. Okay, so I showed you budgets a little bit very quickly. So that's usually the money that you, if you're a contractor, that's the money that you've been given in your contract with the owner to deliver the project. And then, of course, you've got commitment tracking that you're going to want to do. Commitment tracking can come with lots of different flavors. The inventory release was the way that we would release the corporate long-term purchases into the project. So that's where those would go. But we might also give some subcontracts, purchase orders. So those would go inside of here. And then, of course, once we start to actually execute, we'll have actuals and invoices. Okay, so all of that paperwork is coming from the modules within the project. And what that means is you want to be able to keep track, of course, of what is providing, where are you at any given time, okay? So you want to make sure your commitments are less than your budget, otherwise you've got a problem and you're going to go over your contract value, and likely you'll end up with some disputes, which of course you want to avoid, okay? So we can have multiple contracts distributed to the same cost code. So we've got full cost tracking inside the system. Now these are fed by the different modules that we've put together inside the system. So that's really the big thing, is they're feeding automatically. So you don't have to do double dipping, double accounting, none of that. You just create your document as normal. So if I wanted to create a purchase order or a contract, they look very much the same. It's usually the workflow that is typically different. And I'll go show you what a contract looks like, okay? So it's usually the workflow that's different, usually because a contract may have a larger dollar value, it may have more requirements, so it usually has a more complicated workflow. So we can see the workflow on any given document, okay? Now we can look at it graphically. So this is a very simple one. So where we create it, once we create it, we send it to somebody to be approved. And the somebody could be a person with an email, or it could be a group of people that fulfill a particular role, okay, depending on your processes. If we have a certain dollar value approval process, we could have additional steps inside of here, okay? So usually it would get approved, hopefully, but maybe not. There could be a rejection, or it could have to get revised, resubmitted, and then hopefully approved, or it could get revised and maybe it gets rejected, okay, or canceled in this case. So this is the workflow for this particular contract approach, okay? Now again, the workflow can vary by module. It could also vary by project. And you could put certain different paths in there depending on things like dollar value, complexity. So there can be a variety of different routes that you can take depending on the workflow, okay? And then I can see where I'm at in my workflow. So in this one, it's just a simple one. It was created and it was approved. And that's a demo database. It looks pretty simple here. In the real world, you'd have generally more steps. So contract includes, of course, the terms, and it has some dollar amounts usually. And those dollar amounts are all fed from the line items, like I showed you earlier on the blanket PO, on the master service agreement. So when we're talking about any document that contains some money, they usually look pretty much the same. Now this contract may have some pending changes, and it looks like we do. Okay, so we have a change order that's out there. It's maybe not approved yet. You can see it's still pending. So we're waiting for somebody to sign it, or perhaps some documentation's missing. A change order is very similar in look to a contract because it's also a money document. So we've got the change and we have the amount of the change in scope. Now that can be cost coded as it is in this example. It also can be tied to things like P6 activities. If we want to look at merging Unifier, integrating it with P6, okay? So we can do that inside the system. Now we might have some changes that have been approved, okay? So we've got that track here. So these have gone through the review, the approval process. And again, we can navigate them to them right from this area, okay? So these are more or less the same, just different statuses. Now, as the contract is executed, there will be payments that will take place. So these payments can, typically you want to merge or marry the payments from the daily records that are taking place, okay? So we've got backup material. So I'll show you that in a minute. And again, we might want to see whether any submittals are outstanding, whether we've got any questions outstanding, okay? So RFIs. Okay, so let me just navigate over to an RFI just so you can see that real quick. So as we execute the work, whether it's in the fabrication shop, whether it's at the job site, whether it's in engineering, there will be documentation that you want to keep track of. So an RFI is usually a request for information. So it's usually a question from the job site, usually, but it doesn't have to be. And if you want different documents to allow you to segregate questions from the fabrication shop to the site, that's not a problem. You just create different modules with different names. Okay, so very, very easy to keep very good track of it, particularly because the person answering the question from the fabrication shop may not be the same person answering the questions from the field. So this would allow even more dynamic, easy to develop security. So we're going to want to have a document that has a question, perhaps a proposed solution, perhaps a cost and schedule impact. And this could be in a very high level form as this. So just a yes, and we think it's about $25,000 with a bit of explanation as to why there's a cost and a schedule impact, okay? So this is an interesting example. We think there's a cost, but we do think it's going to save time, okay? So this could be a good document to move forward into a change order, okay? Okay, so very simple way of developing the documents and to invoke the workflow, we would just have a pick list here saying send it for approval. Okay, now this particular one has already been approved, but you get the idea that, hopefully you get the idea that it's relatively easy to navigate and move across the different documents. Now, I want to wrap up. I know this is super fast, but hopefully I'm giving you a feel for the capabilities. I want to wrap up with something that's a very interesting module that we built. It's a LEMS module. So this one's quite interesting because you can build a very detailed daily job site record. And in our neck of the woods, they're usually called LEMS. So labor, equipment, and material, and disbursements. And the S is usually for subcontractor. So this allows us to track in detail. I can open up this detailed record here. In detail, exactly the work that's taking place at the job site. Okay, so this, let me just make this a bit bigger. So I've got a welder, this is the person's name, doing some work on a particular activity. Now this activity, as I mentioned earlier, can marry up with P6. Now I can make this document have just the hours and overtime, triple time, double time, as you wish. And this is a pick list that I build and I record this. Now then the next day, if the person's continuing on that same scope of work, it's easy to copy the LEM and create the next day's record. Equipment can be logged. And again, I'm tracking it against an activity from P6. So I can merge all of this up and feed it into P6 once it's approved. If I have any materials that have been purchased or any disbursements, okay? So you might have travel disbursements, you might have mileage disbursements, etc., that you can track. So once that's recorded, I can get it field approved. So this works very well for the field approver. So it will automatically send it to the person who's doing the field approvals. Now, in doing that, you may not need the field approver to see the rates. So in this case, it's stripping out the rates. So the person recording it, which could be the contractor, or you could have an Excel sheet that you upload from the contractor. Those are different options. But the approver may not need to know anything about the financials. Okay, so this helps you with security. It helps keep confidential information confidential. Okay, so you can see in this case, there was an accept or decline button. So I'm the approver. I can accept it. Once I've reviewed it, I can send it, and that would send it on to the next step. Okay, so it could be for approval, it could be for revision. So this is how easy it is to invoke a different workflow. Okay, now in that case, it's sending it for financial approval next. Now this person does need to see the actual costs. Okay, so this is how you could piggyback different modules with similar data, but feeding in different components to the data. So the benefit here is this gets you the capability of pre-approving daily effort, daily cost, especially if you're in a unit rate contract, and then it's going to go to a daily pre-approval for payment. Okay, so this is super powerful in terms of being able to keep track of what is happening at the job site with the appropriate approvals. Now, just because I'm running out of time, it can also feed a full summary of all the labor. Okay, so this is a module that's taking all the data here and just flat listing it. So it's just pivoting it, if you will, to automatically show you all the hours each person has performed. So I can certainly change the way this layout is, and I can see all the hours that Betty has performed or Terry. Okay, so that's it's automatic. It's happening automatically is what I'm trying to get across. Just because it's feeding from one module to these piggyback modules, if you will. Okay. And then I can do the same thing for reports that do emerge off of various disciplines. Okay, so it's happening automatically. Now, I didn't touch too much on changes. I showed you a change order, but we can also have a very elaborate change management module with different tracking of reasons, and the reasons for changes can be summarized, and we can see all the documents that are unforeseen conditions. So I can start to see the different areas where these are taking place. So it could be against a new contract. I might have to hire or go out for a new PO because of a certain condition, or it could be different quotes and change orders that are following into this category. Okay, so again, this is just a piggyback module that's pivoting the data and bringing it into different reporting mechanisms. Okay, so super strong capabilities within the system to do. I showed you very briefly costing, briefly some documents, very briefly some site, and some changes in scope. And I showed you the layering that's inside the system. Okay. Okay, I see one question. I think I'll leave the demo there for the moment. I'll go back to wrapping up with the slides, and let's see what this question is. Does Unifier have program to project and project to program for the purpose rolling reporting and drill down of cost, schedule, earn value? Yes, yes, it does. So that's what I was trying to show you, but I showed you a corporate level. And I showed you the functionality of grabbing costs up to the master worksheet and the specific worksheet down at the project. So I hope you saw that. If you want more information on that, we can do a deeper dive if that makes sense, but hopefully I gave you a bit of an overview. And yes, there are cost curve capabilities and earned value capabilities at the project and doing some roll-ups as well. Now, if you want to get into the deep dive on that, P6 makes good sense as a way to marry that data up as well. So most of our clients that are doing that work do bring in their P6 activities so that they can tag against them and see these earn value against them. Okay, so some of the feedback, of course, is related to the ability to improve teamwork, okay, because people are able to access very readily different modules at different levels. That's a huge win. And of course, it makes it easier to deploy because of all the capabilities on the workflow, making sure people only have access to the data they need. And as I mentioned, we've got the ability to tie it to telephones, if you wish, to more simplified portals. So you might have certain vendors that you just want to allow to do certain things like submit RFIs, submit photos. So you can give them a scaled down component as well. So we've got a lot of different capabilities in deployment. From the management perspective, the accuracy. So the immediate availability of the data is the huge win there, and the visibility with the different hierarchies and the ability to push data to different modules. So you're just taking a component of the data. So if you're in charge of safety, you don't necessarily want to have to dig through all the different LEMS daily records. You might just want to see a safety log. Okay, so you'd have that pumping out there automatically from the daily records as well. And then the key thing here, it's faster to deliver, avoid claims, liquidated damages, less rework. So you have a better handle on the different drawings. Should never be in a position where you're working off old documents, old drawings, because you can see what's going on there. And we can feed documents readily to different players. Okay, so that's the real benefit of the tool. Okay, so this was a very quick overview. Hopefully you saw things that sparked some interest, sparked some ideas on gaps that you might have. And really what I showed you was multiple people's roles, right? Who people doing your contracting, doing your site work. It's usually different people. So it's just a very quick overview of the kinds of things that you can do in Unifier. Okay, so the power, it's very, very powerful system. We've got different tools that work with Unifier. We've got loaders from Excel. We've got migrators. So if you were using contract management and you did want to move some of your projects in, we have tools to do that. We also have tools that archive project management data, if that makes more sense. Okay, so it just sort of depends on where you're at with that. So those are things that you can explore further with us. And we've done lots of integrations as well. So we've integrated to many systems. So pretty much every ERP and many asset management tools. So Maximo, SAP, JD Edwards, Fusion, etc. Okay, because there could be definite benefit to have some of the documents from Unifier feed over to those other systems to keep so you're usually going to pay, let's say, out of your SAP, but all the legwork to pre-approve the payment is done in Unifier. Okay, so that's where integration can make a lot of sense with these tools. Okay, so if I don't see any additional questions at the moment, but if there are, feel free to throw those in there and I'll tackle them. I'll stop the recording.